Welcome to That They May All Be One, the podcast of the Center for Catholic and Evangelical Theology. The CCET is a theological enterprise of Catholic, Protestant, and Orthodox Christians whose goal is to promote faithfulness throughout the Church to the Word of God in Jesus Christ. It seeks to advance the knowledge of God's revelation as authoritatively mediated by Holy Scripture and normatively interpreted by the Church's creedal and dogmatic tradition. Without avoiding the difficult issues that divide us, it seeks ways in which our traditions, East and West, Reformation and Catholic, North and South, might enrich one another in pursuit of Christian unity. We are glad that you have joined us. Welcome to the podcast of the Center for Catholic and Evangelical Theology, That They May All Be One. I'm your host, Doug Sweeney, and I'm joined today by Archbishop Joseph Marino, apostolic nuncio and president emeritus of the Pontifical Ecclesial Academy in Rome. The Archbishop kindly spoke at our Pro Ecclesia conference a few months ago. He has become a great encouragement to us at the center. We want to ask him about his ministry and ecumenical interests. But before we do, let me introduce him to you formally. Archbishop Marino has served as a priest and ecclesiastical diplomat on several different continents and as president of the Pontifical Ecclesial Academy in Rome. Ordained to the priesthood in 1979, he served here in Birmingham before being called to the Vatican. He has studied canon law. He served as a nuncio, diplomat, and peacemaker in places like the Philippines, Uruguay, Nigeria, Great Britain, Bangladesh, Malaysia, East Timor, and Brunei. Pope Benedict XVI made him an archbishop. Pope Francis made him president of the Pontifical Ecclesial Academy and appointed him to the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples. And throughout his long career, the Archbishop has demonstrated a strong commitment to evangelism, social transformation, and ecumenism as well. We're excited to have you with us today, Archbishop. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Doug, and congratulations to all your wonderful work and the conference a couple of months ago.
Yeah. Well, lots of people know who you are already, but for those listening now who don't, let me ask an introductory question. How did you first get called to the priesthood and get involved in ministry?
I think the word you used is the key word about vocation, call. You feel it, you sense it, you're attracted to it, you pray about it, you think about it, you consult about it. And in my senior year in high school here in Birmingham at John Carroll, I spoke to the priest who was in charge of us for our spiritual life. Yeah. And he said, well, it sounds like you may have a vocation. And he invited me to go to a seminary, which is the place where you discern if there is a vocation, with a group of priests who live with us, the other seminarians, through education, through a spiritual life, conferences, reflection, and then the bishop here sent me to Rome to study theology and to continue the seminary work in Rome at the North American College. So it begins with a call. Of course, the word vocation comes from vox, the Latin word, which means call. So the vocation is a call. It comes from God. And we have to open our hearts, our ears, our souls to listen to it and to go forward if we truly believe the Lord is calling.
Yeah, marvelous. So you went to seminary where?
In Pennsylvania, Scranton, Pennsylvania, for the philosophy part, and then in Rome for theology.
And then when you began practicing as a priest, where were you serving?
In Birmingham, at the cathedral in downtown Birmingham, with a senior priest for 4 years. And I was there, a pastoral ministry.
Yeah. I think a lot of our listeners would be interested in learning about what ministry as a diplomatic representative of the Vatican is like. And as you know, because I asked you this over lunch, I'm interested in learning how leaders in the Catholic Church discern which sorts of priests would be best suited for the work of diplomatic ministry. How did that go in your case? How did you get invited, selected to serve in diplomatic ministry? And then just practically, what happened as you were encouraged to move in that direction?
Well, it happened right here in Birmingham. The bishop called me and he said, come talk to me. He had received a letter from the Vatican asking for him to release me to go to the diplomatic school in Rome that you mentioned earlier, the Pontifical Ecclesial Academy. But I know the question behind that is, well, why did the Vatican choose you?
Yeah, how does that go? Who knew you, and how did they decide you were appropriately gifted? And
I really don't know exactly who put my name in the pot, if you wish.
Yeah.
But I had studied in Rome as a seminarian before being ordained, before returning to Birmingham. So it could have been a professor at one of the universities. It could have been someone on the seminary staff. Then, of course, the person who has to evaluate if you should enter the school probably went through the file and the evaluations, and they invited me to come. That was in 1984.
Wow.
So I returned to Rome in 84 to start the diplomatic school. Upon invitation, you can't apply.
Yeah.
It's by invitation only.
My. All right, so as a young priest who's being invited to do this, what's going through your own mind? How are you discerning what God is doing through all this as you're sort of being moved to Rome to study at the academy?
Well, first of all, I would say most people would not even know that the Vatican has a diplomatic service.
Did you know as a young guy?
Well, having studied in Rome, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to pass by the school every day. We would walk to the university from the North American College. We knew, of course we knew. And I remember when I told my parents that I'd been invited to go to the diplomatic school, and it would mean going from one country to another over a course of many, many, many years and being here. My mother said, "Oh, you're going to be a missionary." Oh. And in a sense, it is. You're being sent from one place to another. And when we go look at some of the writings of Pope Francis, he talks about a church being missionary, and he wanted the diplomatic service to have that spirit of going outward and being a missionary in style. So the school, for me, lasted for 4 years.
Okay.
And then at the end of the 4 years, which at that time we had to have a doctorate in an ecclesiastical study, and at least a license in canon law, my first assignment was the Philippines. So from Rome to the Philippines, then Uruguay. I think you mentioned some of the countries.
Yeah, you've
Nigeria,
been all over.
Yes, most of the continents. And one was better than the other in terms of experience. And so that was my life since 1988.
Yeah. So people like me listening sort of have an inkling as to what this ministry is like, but we kind of wish we knew more. So let me just ask you, if you're going to represent the Vatican as a diplomat in one way or another, maybe as a nuncio most significantly, because that's the role you played,
the ambassador,
kind of ministry culminated, ambassador. What does that mean you do? What's the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month ministry of somebody like that? What does it look like?
Well, the basic definition of a diplomat that comes out of the Vatican would be to maintain a constant and stable relationship between the local church in a particular country and the Pope. As you know, in the Catholic Church, the unity with the Pope is a fundamental element of who we are as Catholics, that union with the Pope. And of course, he cannot be in every place at every time all over the world, and 1.4 billion Catholics. And it's like a two-way street. The local churches being attracted to being in union with the Pope, and the Pope wanting to be in union with the local churches. Sometimes the bishops will go directly to the Pope if there's an issue they want to discuss. Sometimes the Pope sends a letter to the local churches to be for some event or some question that needs to be raised that he wants to be in touch with them about. But those are intermediate. It's not constant.
Yeah.
It's not stable. Or the Pope would go visit the countries, which we really saw with John Paul II and of course Francis, and those are ways to be in union between the Pope and the local churches. But the constant, stable way is through the nuncio, who lives in the country, representing. You mentioned Vatican. It would be better to say representing the Pope, because it's not a relationship with the Vatican. It's a relationship with the Pope. Countries decide to enter into a diplomatic relation with the Holy See, and the Pope is the head of the Holy See.
Yeah. Did your work, we named a whole bunch of different countries where you were serving over the course of your ministry. I would guess that your ministry changes a bit from country to country just based on the kinds of people, the kinds of sort of predominant religions, that you find in these contexts. The Philippines was one place you were. That's a very Catholic country. But there were other countries like Bangladesh that are less known for Catholicism. Does that mean that your job as an ambassador changes? Or are you still mostly doing the same things, just with a different set of people around you?
That is the way it is. It's the same thing with a different set of people, because one of the definitions of the work of the nuncio is to establish, or to help the bishops establish, a good and stable relationship with other Christian communities and other religions. So in the Philippines, it would be to be in relation with other Christian churches, ecclesial communities, and in Bangladesh, it would be to foster a good relationship with the Muslim community. There in Bangladesh, you're talking about 90% Muslim. And to live and to be able to live the faith in that environment, which it was very permitted, you want to maintain the good relations with those of other religions. And I must say, all these experiences, the people of other religions, if it's Christian religions or non-Christian religions, there's a goodwill. There's a goodwill among people. And you discover immediately that parents have the same aspirations for their children. Parents have the same concerns about the future of their children. Young people have the same questions about their future. There's a unity in the human reality of, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Catholic, if you're a Lutheran, if you're Orthodox, whatever, there is a commonality there that exists. And you work within that environment. And try to foster where we can work together in that context.
Well, we've already said that eventually you became the president of the academy that trains people to do this kind of work. I'm interested in a couple of things about that part of your life. I'm interested, first of all, in what you teach people at the academy, because in the back of my mind I've got the question, so how much of what you had to do for most of your ministry did you learn to do in school, versus how much of it do you just sort of have to be wired in a special way to do well? Does it take a certain kind of person to serve well as a diplomat, or can it all be taught to almost any kind of person?
Well, I think you have to have good human qualities. That's very important.
I would think.
You would have to have good intellectual qualities, the ability to analyze, to think, to make decisions. And you have to be a good priest. I always used to tell the guys, if you're a good priest, you will be a good diplomat for the Holy See, for the Holy Father.
By good priest, you're referring to the pastoral part of being a priest?
What it means to be an outgoing priest and caring and loving for people, and to being involved with the life of the people, especially the Catholic community. Because yes, in the diplomatic service, you're definitely in contact with people of other religions, but you're primarily in contact with the Catholic community. In their relation with the Holy Father, his relationship with them. And this is at every level: the lay people, the religious sisters, the brothers, the priests, and of course the bishops. So you have to have a spirit of the church, a spirit of a priest, what it means to foster that relationship in terms with one another, within the community, and with the Holy Father himself. So that's the first thing, to be a good human being and a good priest. And I think the diplomatic elements come pretty easily, because it's important to know basics of international law. It's important to know the history of papal diplomacy, how that worked over the centuries, the 2,000-year history of the church, what it meant in the 20th century, which was a very dynamic diplomatic service of the Vatican. You had 2 world wars, you had regional conflicts, you had the question of religious liberty arising towards the end of that century. So you have to know how all of those international mechanisms work and operate, and how the Holy See is involved with it. And that is extremely important. And so that is taught, obviously. And then a lot is taught about the selection of bishops, because it is the role of the apostolic nunciature to send to the Holy Father names of priests who are worthy to be considered by him to be a bishop.
That's a big deal.
Because it is a big deal, and as you know, only the Pope can name bishops. Without his mandate, it is not valid. So he has to know who are the proper candidates.
Yeah.
And that's an important job in the Vatican embassies, or the nunciatures as we call them.
Yeah.
To listen to the bishops who they think priests are good, and then to evaluate if they should be considered by the Pope.
Okay. So it's been a few years since you were leading the academy, but not that long. What at the academy, what are you trying to do with the priests who are sent your way? How are you trying to form them? Clearly, they're learning some things academically, and beyond that, what are you trying to get done with them so that they serve well in these roles?
We live together, and the total number of students, usually around 36 from around the world, representing 4 years of formation, development. And the primary thing that we living together as a community of priests coming from all over the world, some from Africa, some from Latin America, some from North America, some from Europe, some from Asia, to live our common priesthood, celebrating Mass together, praying together, eating together, recreating together when it was possible, and to create a spirit, a fraternal spirit, because in the end we'll be working together for the rest of our lives. Yeah. And so we have to have a spirit of wanting to be with each other, wanting to dialogue with each other, respecting each other. And that was very important in terms of our lifestyle. And then, of course, we had to know canon law, because the nunciature is part of the governing aspect of the church. So we have to know the basic canon law of how the church operates on an institutional level. And then, of course, to learn different subjects that are so pertinent for today, the church and society. So that was part of it.
Sure. Do the ambassadors have regular meetings? Does the Pope bring them back to Rome?
Every 3 years.
Okay.
Every 3 years. Update the situation, what's expected, to become aware of new issues emerging in the world. The last one that I attended, we had like a conference on artificial intelligence and what that means for the world today. I'm afraid that conference probably has been superseded by so many advancements in 3 years.
Sure.
But at least introduced to these new realities that are affecting the world.
Yeah.
And of course, it affects the world, it's going to affect the church.
Yeah. Which are the instructional languages at the academy? You teach them in what language?
Italian.
Italian.
Because that's where we live, in Italy.
Okay. So everybody who comes, no matter where in the world you're coming from, needs to be ready to learn in Italian.
Right. And many have that ability because they had studied in Rome before as seminarians. Yeah. If not, they learn. Yeah. And you would be surprised they learn quickly, especially young people. They can learn languages very quickly. And then, of course, living in the language, you learn it. But through television, whatever, and living together, the Mass, everything.
Yeah. Of course, at the Center for Catholic and Evangelical Theology, we have an ecumenical mission. I want to ask you about ecumenism and what you think about the future of ecumenism, the degree to which you're hopeful about it. You've had a privileged position, more privileged than most of us have, from which to kind of look at how things are going universally in the church. I'm also interested in asking you just personally about how your own ecumenical interests kind of emerged and were developed over the years. Is there a certain amount of ecumenism that's just kind of baked into the role of the ambassador? So you need to be somebody pretty early on who's thinking ecumenically? And
well, part of our priestly formation in the early 70s dealt with the ecumenical question right after the Second Vatican Council. Yeah. And of course, living in an environment in a pluralistic society, as we do in the United States, different religions, and how we live together, and to encourage us to work together on so many issues that Christians can give a testimony to. So
you kind of grew up.
Yes.
Just post-Vatican II, young guy. It was
in
just
Alabama.
in the air.
Right.
You're a Catholic in Alabama, which, there are a lot of Catholics around, but there's lots of other kinds of Protestants around too.
Correct.
So you're probably thinking ecumenically.
And even as a young priest, Bishop Vath, who was bishop at the time I was here, organized with the Southern Baptist Convention an ecumenical dialogue, and he asked me to go along with him. So I think he had 3 or 4 priests, and they had 3 or 4 ministers and their leader, and we just kind of like lived a weekend together discussing our common faith in Jesus as Savior,
Huh.
because we begin with that.
Yeah.
And what is so encouraging in my many years in different countries, to see how missionaries, Catholic missionaries, cooperating with the local different churches.
Sure.
You know, I never saw the Catholic missionaries, if they were running a soup kitchen or giving out food, ask for an identity card. Are you Catholic?
Right.
Whoever needed help got help. And this was in cooperation with the other religions, so that to serve the people is an important ecumenical endeavor in our world today, especially in the countries that need that help.
I'm wondering how somebody who has had the kind of ministry you've had from the 1970s to the present has processed the history of ecumenism in the period of your adult life. You know, the early years of your adult life, I would think, were very exciting ecumenical years. Everybody's in the wake of Vatican II. It's changing everything all over the place. You get to the early 21st century, and a lot of us start feeling different about the prospects of ecumenism. There's a little less electricity in the air. There's a little less excitement. Lots of people talk about an ecumenical winter kind of setting in. I'm hoping you'll hold out for the rest of us reasons to hope in the future of ecumenism. But how's that gone for you?
Well, obviously, we want total union. That's the goal. You know, that was the prayer of our Lord at the Last Supper, that they may all be one. And of course, in the biblical sense, it had many other meanings, but certainly it is a prayer that Christ prayed before.
It's the title of this podcast.
It's the title of the podcast. Yes, you mentioned at the very beginning. That's right, that we may be one. You know, it's always exciting to see when there is an agreement on a theological level on some issue that seems to divide. And, you know, and I think we've had many since the Second Vatican Council. I'm not an expert in the theological aspect.
All the dialogues.
All the dialogue, you know. But when it comes out, you say, oh, wow, that's a breakthrough. And there have been many, you know, and there will be more. But theological ecumenism, we have to depend on people like you. We have to depend on the theologians of all our different religions to keep making these movements forward. But there are other levels of ecumenism, which I don't think there's a winter. You know, praying together.
Right.
We can pray together. That's a lot. Because there was a time when we didn't.
Yeah, that's right. And it wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't
really.
that long ago.
Yeah.
But I think today it would be remiss if we didn't pray together, if we were at a pluralistic meeting, a Catholic, Orthodox, another whatever. You know, to pray together seems to be so normal now.
Yeah.
And in respect of each other's tradition, of course, and so I think a spiritual ecumenism is there. And whenever it's possible, we do it.
Yeah.
And we should. And then there's the ecumenism of charity, working together for those who need the witness of Christians.
Yeah.
And that's boundless.
Yeah.
If you
and
go
it's
to
almost automatic these days.
it's almost automatic. And again, if you go to some of the countries where I worked, you know, in Nigeria, you would have the Anglicans and the Catholics taking care of those in need in the villages. Or even in Bangladesh, where the Christian community was very small, but the Catholics with the Protestant religions, again very small, doing things together as witness for those in need. So there's ecumenism of prayer and the ecumenism of charity. Yeah. And maybe when those get stronger, the theological questions may become easier. Who knows? I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
I'm not expert, but maybe some of the theological questions may seem to be, wait a minute, we're doing so much together. Do we need to stay apart because of this one simple issue, this one comma in a document which can be removed, you know?
Well, one of the things that's been exciting for me about your return to the States is that you're a neighbor now.
Yes.
And you are a pretty ecumenical man, and you've been very friendly and supportive to the Center for Catholic and Evangelical Theology. I don't guess you heard a lot about us when you were working in Rome and all over the world, but you're hearing a lot about us now. You very kindly participated in our conference that just took place in January. So far, so good. How have you processed your experience with the center?
I'm always here. Just give me a call. No, congratulations. Keep up the good work. We can never get despaired. No, we would give in. We would give in to the one who wants to keep us apart, and we know who that is.
That's right. Yeah. Well, thank you for your investment. Thanks for helping us to promote the work of the center. All right. Last question for you. What's it like being a quote-unquote retired archbishop? You got to an age where you were required to send your letter of retirement.
You had the option at 70 in our case, yes.
So how's that been for you? How's the return to Birmingham been? How busy is the bishop keeping you around here? Those sorts of things.
How busy are the priests keeping me?
Okay.
Because they need help too, and I'm happy to do it. That's what it means, to go back to, not to go back, but to continue to be a priest in a different setting, this time with the parishes and the priests, which is very good.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. Thanks for being a neighbor. Thanks for being invested in ecumenism.
Yes.
This has been Archbishop Joseph Marino. There's lots of things to say about the history of his ministry, but most recently he served as president of the Pontifical Ecclesial Academy in Rome, spent most of his ministry as an ambassador of the Pope. He's now a neighbor back here in Birmingham, where he's from originally. Great to have you on the show with us. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Please join us as we pray and work with Jesus on the unity of his church. You've been listening to the podcast of the Center for Catholic and Evangelical Theology, That They May All Be One. Thanks for tuning in. Please join us again next time as we continue to seek ways in which God's people, past and present, near and far, might enrich one another in pursuit of Christian unity.